Hello and welcome to the first video of our course. My name is Rubén Carrillo and this is the first in the series of videos that we will be watching for our first lecture session outside Europe, Trade and the Formation of Polities to 1500. These and the subsequent videos that we're going to see contain ideas and themes that we will analyze further in the face-to-face online session that we're going to have together with the resources that you will find in the requested readings for those topics. So let me get started right away and talk about long-distance trade. Now, trade is the exchange of goods between two or more places across the distance between them. And it's important to note that there's nothing new about trade. It's a phenomenon that has been taking place across human societies since the very earliest stages of human history. So it's very important to bear that in mind. In fact, if we go way back into the Bronze and the Iron Age of 3000 to 1200 before the Common Era, we can already see that there is a complex system of exchanges in place in the Middle East and other parts of Afro-Eurasia. In fact, if we look at one example, this harp from the treasures of the royal tombs of Ur that was made between 2600 and 2500 BCE, we see various materials that were used that were imported into the city of Ur, right in southern Mesopotamia. This is the Sumerian civilization. And we can see gold from Egypt. We can see shell from the Persian Gulf. We can see lapis lazuli from far away in what is now and nowadays Afghanistan. So this vast trade network of the Bronze Age depended on the importation of various goods. You needed tin and copper to make bronze in the Bronze Age. You needed silver to purchase exchanges and to organize taxes and revenues. And you would use these kinds of goods to acquire ivory or incense from faraway places in order to secure your place as part of the elite in this civilization. So there's nothing new about trade, and we shouldn't think that complex trade networks are a recent development in human history. Now, one of the examples of long distance trade routes is, of course, the Silk Road. Now, the Silk Road is very, very famous. In fact, it's so famous that there are children's books written about this. There are Netflix TV series based around the Silk Road. And it's actually kind of a misnomer. The Silk Road was never really a road that connected Europe and China. In fact, it was only a part, mind you, a very important part, and probably the backbone of a very complex Afro-Eurasian trade network that was much, much larger than just the Silk Road per se. This vast trade network was already in place during Roman and Imperial China time, so the time of the Han Dynasty and the Roman Empire between the second century and the BCE and the second century CE. So nothing new again. Now, through this trade network, we not only have products, but we also have other unseen exchanges along these trade routes. For one, we have the communication of information. And along the Silk Road, for example, we can all think about Marco Polo in his famous trip to China and the information that was brought back and reported in his book Il Milione. And of course, again, in the Silk Road, we have the transmission of the Black Death in the 14th century. Apart from that, we also have religion. Buddhism spread through the Silk Road between the year 500 BCE and 600 CE. And of course, technology. The four great inventions of China, compass, gunpowder, paper making, and printing, all disseminated along these avenues of exchange. So trade routes are a major component of cross-cultural pollination, innovation, and exchanges in human history. Now, what makes a trade route successful? Well, there must be two or more economic systems producing a surplus. You need a surplus in order to trade this surplus. Now, the surpluses between these economic systems must complement each other, because otherwise you don't want the other person's stuff. There must be, or it's helped by social asymmetry, because that creates elites. And the elites are the people who have the money, who have the purchasing power to acquire luxury goods from far away. And there must be natural avenues or technologies that facilitate long distance trades across regions. So what comes first? We're talking about the relationship between trade and the establishment of political entities, of states, empires. So what comes first? Trade routes facilitate the accumulation of wealth and social diversification, leading to hierarchies that create states? Or is it the other way around? Are the elites and the states that form that facilitate trade by regulating and providing protection, thus increasing the profitability and incentivizing trade? This is a really an egg and chicken point, which I want you to bear in mind across the next, this video and the next following videos. And it's something that we're going to be debating in our face-to-face online session. Now, we're going to look at different case studies. Okay, I just briefly discussed the Silk Road, but I want to analyze other lesser known cases to analyze this phenomenon of trade and the formation of polities. And we're going to look at the extra-European examples so as to enrich your perspective on global history. So the first one we're going to look at in this very video is the Riverine North American trade system. Later in another video, we're going to talk about the Mesoamerican Pueblo trade system. And in a subsequent video, the Trans-Saharan trade system to discuss Africa before European contact. And of course, we're going to finish this series of videos with a discussion of the monsoon Indian Ocean trade system, which actually supplanted the overland Silk Road that we just discussed a minute ago. All right, so throughout this analysis of case studies, I want you to bear in mind some major themes that are going to come up constantly. The first one is this matter of state building and elites. What are these people? How are they justifying power, and how is this power manifesting itself? Then we're going to be talking about how these elites relate to material culture and exchanges. We're also going to talk about technological and cultural exchanges across distances, across different trade systems. And then, and perhaps most importantly, we're going to talk about breaks and continuities in trade systems, and see how these various avenues of exchanges have in fact very long staying power in human history. We will discuss in particular what was the effect of contact with Europeans upon these trade networks, and how Europeans use these existing trade networks to enhance their own position in the world. So the first one, the Riverine North American trade. This is probably the least well-known of the trade routes that we're going to discuss. And I want to start here just because it is the lesser known of all of them. Because when one thinks about the North American interior, that's the area today is known as the American Midwest. It's a vast region in the American interior. We normally associate this region with empty spaces, before European contact, very sparsely populated, and that only became urbanized and civilized, quote unquote, with the arrival of Europeans and the opening of the so-called American frontier. Now, this couldn't be further from the truth, as I will demonstrate in the next couple of slides. So first of all, there has been urbanization in this area for a long time. Poverty Point in Louisiana was the first city ever built in North America, and it was already in place in 1500 BC. So that's 3,500 years ago. The estimated population is not very big. It's between 3,000 and 4,000 inhabitants. But one needs to bear in mind that most people used to live in communities of no more than 100 inhabitants at this time. So it was truly a break with patterns of human habitation in the area, for sure. And Poverty Point also is the first example of an earthen mound building tradition, which, as we will see, had very long staying power in this part of the world over the next centuries. So after Poverty Point, we have the development of the Adena culture further north in the Ohio River area. This one developed between 1000 and 200 BCE and is characterized by the construction of hundreds of earthen cone-shaped burial mounds. It was a very rich culture in terms of the trade that it had, and it developed agriculture and exchanges further. Now, after the Adena culture, we have the development of what's called the Hopewell tradition or the Hopewell material culture complex, which was developed between 100 BCE and 500 CE. And it's characterized by very particular artwork, in particular mica sculpture of animals and talons. You have some examples in this image. And also the development, the trading of pipes, very nicely crafted pipes with animal figures that were widespread across the region. And this signals that, in fact, that there were long distance exchanges across this vast area that includes the southern Canada all the way down into the Gulf of Mexico. And it also shows the cultivation and trade of tobacco during this period. So after the Hopewell, there was a crisis that we don't know exactly what happened, but there was a hiatus in mound building. That is, there were less structures being built, and the richness of the material culture also decayed quite noticeably. However, during this period, we have the construction of various effigy mounds. These are, again, earthen mounds that, instead of being the big pyramid-like structures, these were shaped like animals. One example is the Serpent Mound in Ohio, but we also have panthers and cougars in other areas. So it was a widespread phenomenon. We also have the arrival of corn, maize, which arrived from further south, from Mexico, where it was originally domesticated, or from the Pueblo region, with which Mexico had extensive contacts, as we will see in another video. Maize became widely cultivated across this area of the Riverine Midwest by 800 CE. So a long time after the end of the Hopewell tradition. But this incorporation of corn meant the increasing farming activity, and other cultivars also proliferated, mainly squash and beans. And this is the holy trinity of pre-contact America's agriculture: squash, beans, and maize. And then further south, we will see, we also have the development of potato agriculture. But maize, squash, and beans production also help an increase of the population. So the population increases, and with more population, there's also the introduction of the bow and arrow that is introduced from Canada after 500 CE. Now, if you have a lot of people and you have weapons, sadly, the consequence was an increment in violence. There is more evidence of violent death around this time. So right about that time, 800, we have a new flourishing of mound building tradition. And we're talking about tens of thousands of mounds. We're talking about a lot of mound building going on. And interestingly, these mounds are now associated with densely populated sites. So we're talking about the emergence of hundreds of cities all across the area between Canada and the Gulf of Mexico, in Georgia, in Arkansas, Oklahoma, Alabama, Kentucky, Indiana, all over the place. These cities emerge and dot the landscape. But the biggest, the most important of them all is certainly Cahokia, in the present day state of Illinois, right in the middle of this area, which flourished between the year 900 and 1300 CE. Now, Cahokia features the biggest structure ever built in North America until before European contact, which is Monk's Mouth. Monk's Mouth is the third largest structure, only after the pyramids of Teotihuacan and Cholula in central Mexico. And Cahokia was indeed a huge city. Apart from Monk's Mouth, there was a large central plaza, a palisade, there was a wood henge area that is evidence of astrological observation done by these people. And we're talking about 50,000 inhabitants in the city and its immediate vicinity by the year 1050. This is more than London at this time and for a long time, and it's the largest city in North America, north of the Bravo or of the Grande River, until Philadelphia and New York in the 18th century. So it was a very, very large and unique city. We're talking also about an unprecedented level of social organization, as there's an elite ruling over this vast society. We have a more complex social organization, a chiefdom. Perhaps even we can talk about a royal family, a monarchy even taking place. And this city specializes in production of finished goods for long distance trade. We're talking about copper, so they're also using metallurgy. So copper and clay sculptures, and also chair, this is a type of stone, tools that were produced in the city in order to be traded with far-flung places. Now, Cahokia also exported cultural traits. Some of the most important are the tradition of warfare. We have evidence of warfare in Cahokia's palisades and in the sacrifice of foreign captive women. And we're talking about dozens of women that were all executed and interred in Cahokia, and they were not born in Cahokia. Then we also have the development of chunky. Now, chunky is an interesting game. It's a sport that still existed, and it was very widespread in the 18th and 19th century throughout the entire Midwest region. It's a game that is played with a disc of clay and some hooks. And in Cahokia, it was possibly used as a form of social control in the same way as the Romans used gladiatorial combat as a form of social control. And then we also have the development of the birdman. Now, the birdman is associated with religious practices in Cahokia. It could also be related to the priesthood, origin myths of the population, or perhaps the ruling elite of the city. And some of the nicest expressions of Cahokian arts is very nice repoussé sculptures made in copper of these birdmen, these plaques that were traded with very far-flung places. They were found far away from Cahokia. So Cahokia is at the center of a vast Mississippian trade network that was very strong and actually outlived Cahokia, which was abandoned in 1300. This trade network continued to exist even after the city disappeared. We're talking about exchange of goods all the way from southern Canada up until the Gulf of Mexico, and from the east coast of the United States all the way to the Rocky Mountains and the Pueblo settlements, and perhaps even some contacts with Mesoamerica may have taken place. So This culture, like I said, outlived Cahokia, and some of the later manifestations of the earth mound building tradition can be seen in the in sites like Emerald in Mississippi. This is a site of the Natchez culture that was very much still thriving through European contact. In fact, the city was only abandoned in 1730. So we're talking about very, very late abandonment of the city. And you can still visit Emerald. This is what it looks like today. It's the second largest mound after Monk's Mound, after Cahokia. So it's worth a visit if you have the time. Now, these Mississippian mound builders continued to exist throughout European contact, like I said, and in fact, Spanish and French chronicles informs us that the area featured flourishing kingdoms and chiefdoms of the Mississippian tradition. Now, of course, European contact was very detrimental to most of the societies, but some of them endured well into the 18th century. Some of the most important of these kingdoms, of these chiefdoms, are the Apalachee, the Coffeetecheki, and the Coosa, and the Attahachie kingdoms, which we will turn to when we have our seminar about the Black Legend and the Conquistadors later on in this course. The other one, of course, is the Natchez Empire or kingdom, which was ruled by the Great Sons. And you can see that it was still a very much stratified community. And like I said, it endured until it revolted against the French, and they were dispersed, actually sold into slavery in the French Caribbean in 1730. Now, these Mississippian trade networks did not die with the people that started the trade networks. In fact, French in particular, but the other Europeans as well, based their occupation of North America along these ancestral trade routes. In particular, if you look at a map of New France, you can see that there is an almost identical overlap of French possessions in the North American continent and the old networks that were used by the mound builders much before them. In fact, the city of St. Louis, at the very heart of New France, is across the river, literally across the river from the city of Cahokia, if you ever plan to visit. So there is continuity in these trade networks, and the Europeans were able to colonize these areas precisely because there were already trade routes well before their arrival in the area. What the Europeans did bring new to the table was the connection of these trade routes to the wider Atlantic world, as we will see in a future lecture. So to sum up, we have analyzed the emergence of long-lasting and very long-lasting earthen mound building tradition in the American Midwest, whose creators engaged in long-distance trade for a very long time, and that they developed stratified societies along these trade routes, which enabled them to construct monumental architecture that can still be seen to this day. And these polities were still thriving upon European contact, and many of them endured throughout the first stages of European contact all the way into the 18th century. And finally, we've also discussed how Europeans used these ancestral existing trade routes to establish their own colonial empire in the region, New France being the prime example of this. In a future video, we will talk about similar continuities between pre-contact or pre-Columbian American peoples and European systems of empire building. So I will see you in those videos. Thank you very much, and see you soon.